let's bring in our panel to discuss today's terror attacks. Joining us from Newsmax New York, host of the eponymously named Steve Malzberg Show, which airs at 7 p.m. weeknights here on Newsmax TV. That, of course, would be Steve Malzberg. Skyping in from the West Coast on the right side of your screen, political commentator and the son of President Reagan, Michael Reagan, who you can follow on Twitter at Reagan World. Likewise, Skyping in from Southern California, former New York Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik. And also tonight, from Newsmax Washington, the chairman of the Congressional Task Force on Terrorism and Unconventional Warfare, Congressman Robert Pittenger of North Carolina, who's also the vice chairman of the Financial Services Committee Task Force investigating terrorism financing. Congressman Pittenger, we really appreciate your time tonight. Your district there around the Charlotte area, what we used to call in the old days Metro-Lina. I understand you had a couple of constituents at least that were in the Brussels airport just 100 feet away from one of the explosions. Are they okay, and what else have you heard from them?
Yes, sir, they are. Appreciate your asking about them. We're, of course, very concerned. They were about 100 feet away. The explosion did not injure them, but clearly was an enormous impact on them personally, just to observe that type of carnage. 34 people dying and 170 people ultimately who have been severely injured with all the attacks that occurred.
Congressman, you have been one of those on Capitol Hill. In your role with the task force, you've been warning about the dangers of sleeper cells for a long time. Do you think these attacks today we are seeing in Belgium are a result of long-term sleeper cells put in place by ISIS?
I think they are sleeper cells, correct. I do think, though, our vigilance has to be clear regarding two tools in our toolbox right now, one of which is very good intelligence gathering and collaboration with our friends and colleagues around the world, and the other one is intercepting the financing. I have hosted, JD, several forums, 3 now to date and 1 upcoming in June, for members of parliament from 25 countries, and about 100 members have come, and our purpose is to work together on intelligence, understanding, collaboration, oversight, as well as learning how we can intercept the money. ISIS has enormous financial requirements just to exist, to manage their state, and so we've got to work. Our Treasury is pursuing this through the FinCEN agency there, but we have to work with FATF and Paris and all these other countries.
In addition to the financing, just one quick question. I'm sorry to interrupt, but time is short. Will you be one member of Congress who will ask for a pause in immigration to this country, especially bringing in Syrian refugees?
Well, we have already passed a bill that puts requirements on the federal government. The DHS and the FBI and the CIA have to sign off on whoever would come in. So I think we put some clear mandates in place.
Yep, if we could pull the money, that would be great, Bob, just as we pulled the money or tried to at least investigate the money going to ISIS and other groups. And we appreciate your vigilance, Congressman Pittenger. We hope you will come back and update us on your efforts there on Capitol Hill. We thank you for joining us this evening from Newsmax Washington. Thanks very much, sir. Now, let me turn to Bernard Kerik, who flew out west today. Bernie, I don't know your circumstances. Were you aware of the attack at the airport, or were you airborne en route to the West Coast when this all went down?
No, I was on a 6 o'clock flight out of Newark into Los Angeles, and I was aware of it when I got up around 3:30 this morning, your time. And then I got a bunch of updates throughout the flight on the way over to Los Angeles.
And in terms of what we need to be thinking about in Homeland Security, as a lawman, how would you prioritize what needs to happen on our shores?
You know what, JD, the success or failure for us in fighting this enemy is all about intelligence. You know, the bad thing here is Belgium, the European nations, the countries surrounding Belgium, they knew that there was an imminent attack. They knew that. But they were unable to stop it because they didn't have enough intel to figure out who they were, where they were, what they were doing. And this is in the aftermath of taking down the Paris terror mastermind of the Paris attacks. So the key is intelligence. Our state, local, and federal authorities have to be communicating. We have to be working with those abroad. But I want to go back to something you said to the congressman. This whole concept of bringing in Syrian refugees by the tens of thousands when we have absolutely no ability to vet them is completely moronic. It's stupid. It should not happen under any circumstance. And I'm not just the only one saying it. The FBI director has said it. The CIA, DHS have said it. This is something that should not be happening.
Yeah, Bob Pittenger and other members of Congress ought to put the kibosh on any spending being allowed to do this. Steve Malzberg, Newsmax New York. 9/11 happened on Bernie Kerik's watch when he was police commissioner. You remember that fateful day. How concerned are you, Steve, that we're headed for another 9/11 here on these shores?
I don't know. I mean, I have to bow to the experts who all say it's inevitable. Who all say we're underestimating the strength of ISIS. I don't know how long it'll take for another 9/11, but I do believe that, and I've been amazed for so many years, but we have an ability to thwart these attacks before they happen. Not that attacks haven't happened, but I'm just amazed that we haven't seen something like Paris or like San Bernardino on a larger scale, or like what we saw today here in New York City. And again, God forbid. But I think there aren't enough adjectives, and Bernie used two of the best: stupid, moronic, suicidal, idiotic, insane, to be allowing ISIS to just send their people here with the refugees. Just give them carte blanche. Let them be welcomed in. I mean, are we looking for dead bodies? And you know what? I'd like to say the answer is no. But when you have a president who did what he did today, after he's done what he's done in the past, he's not emotional, he's not moved. You know what he said today? We're going to help Brussels bring the people responsible to justice, like bring them to court. He doesn't see this as a battle. He doesn't see this as a war like the French president and the rest of the world. He was watching a baseball game, doing the wave, and he can't be bothered with this garbage.
Well, let's go to a man who shares...
So,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Steve, but as you mentioned presidents, we think not so much of President Obama, although he's our current president. A lot of us yearn for the days of President Ronald Reagan. And since we have Michael Reagan with us, Skyping in from Southern California, Michael, first of all, thank you for your patience. You've just returned from an extended tour to the Far East, ironically there to be on the USS Ronald Reagan. And now coming back home, you viewed politics from a distance here in this country. And now you're back home and we see this attack in Europe. Tie it together for us. Both our danger, is it a clear and present danger to our shore? And number two, politically, what do the events of today mean perhaps for tonight's primaries and beyond?
Well, the world is looking to America to once again lead. And as you've been hearing tonight and for a long time, America at this point in time is not leading at all. And I think the President of the United States showed that today. He is still not leading there in Cuba. And I was thinking about while you were talking about the photo of him yesterday in front of Che Guevara there in Cuba, and in what happened this morning, in Brussels, and what's going on there with the terrorists there. And you almost get the idea is there some part of him that blames others, not the terrorists, for what is going on? And I also thought about my father on his first Monday in the Oval Office, January 26th, 1981. His first meeting, if you have a copy of his diaries, go to it. His first meeting, and Bernie, you'll love this, was with the FBI, CIA, National Security, to talk about terrorism and what can be done in that administration to, in fact, thwart terrorism and make it safer for Americans, not only in the United States, but all over the world.
Let me follow up with you, Michael. In terms of the time spent, the president devoted less than a minute to discussing the terror attack, and then went on to praise the communist regime in Cuba and talk about reconciliation. And Michael, while you were just speaking, we saw footage from the baseball game where the president is sitting with Raul Castro as the Tampa Bay Rays were down to play the Cuban national team. What is it about this president? Some have said he is the first post-American president. Is it naivete? Is there something more diabolical in his worldview?
No, I think what you have is somebody looking for his legacy. It's not coming to him, so he's going to make his own legacy, and this is going to be part of his legacy. I tweeted out earlier today at Reagan World, I said, I don't think anybody with the Tampa Bay Rays is going to go to Cuba today and ask them for asylum. I think probably the reason the Cuban team isn't playing in Miami is that only half the team will go back to Cuba. I mean, that's just the reality of what's going on. But something needs to be done on the world stage. Somebody has to take charge. As Steve said, the French presidents called it for a long time. We're at war against these people. But our president refuses to say we're at war against anybody. In fact, he's more at war against conservatives. He's more at war against people of religion. He's more at war against Americans than he ever has been at war against those who are taking the lives of the innocents.
Bernie Kerik, let me turn to you, because hearing Michael recount what would probably happen if that baseball game were in Miami, all the Cuban players asking for asylum, brings us back to the topic of immigration. We understand there are a record number of Cubans coming in not by sea, but trying to cross our southern border, taking advantage of the political refugee status they enjoy. We just are, this administration refuses to take control of borders and enforce current immigration and refugee law.
You know what? There's no explaining it, JD. I mean, for people that have been in this business for as long as I have, and have witnessed other presidents do their job, and you know, I'm sitting here listening to Michael talk about his father, and I remember when they threw Leon Klinghoffer off of the boat in '85, or you know, when they bombed the embassy.
Achille Lauro.
The Achille Lauro, right. And you know, it just, you know, Reagan was preemptive, proactive, responsive, decisive, and that's something we just don't see today, and it's bothersome to somebody like me and others like me that want to make sure that this country's safe, and the leadership's just not there.
JD, if I could jump in for a moment.
Sure, Michael, go ahead.
Something else that I've thought about, and I thought about this a while back, I might as well say it again. You know, we do have an analogy to all this, the refugees coming in. It's called the Mariel boat lift that took place under the Carter administration, when you had Fidel Castro empty out every criminal on the planet in his jail system and send them to the United States of America. I mean, why do we think things are going to be different by bringing these refugees into the United States, that you don't think that there's going to be criminals and jihadists and others that are going to be in that group of people, as there were criminals in the Mariel boat lift that took place under the Carter administration?
You point up an outstanding historical parallel. Steve Malzberg, you mentioned the name of the ship, the Achille Lauro, where Leon Klinghoffer was taken by terrorists and murdered, and we saw the assertive response of President Reagan. I don't think we're going to see any type of assertive response from the current president. What do we have to do, Steve? Just kind of hold on? We got about a minute and a half left here in this segment. Do we just hold on and hope for the best?
Well, here's the problem. Discussing and getting inside Barack Obama's head. He has a different view of America as to try to explain this. It's not naivete, and it's not an accident, and it's not, you know, he's being lazy, or it doesn't move him. He does. He was raised with people, politically speaking, and maybe in reality as well, with his parents, who believed that the West was bad, they were imperialist, and, you know, he's the Palestinians are freedom fighters. So he has that in him. His Cairo speech laid the groundwork. We should expect no different than what we're getting. fighting. Now, if we get Hillary Clinton, here's another winner who today again refused to say Islamic terrorism. She will not, because she's controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood. If she wins, it's going to be more of the same, and that's why we have to coalesce around the Republican nominee and stop this third-party nonsense and stop this, conservative party nonsense. And whoever the nominee is, that's who we go with.
And we will have to go with thanks to Michael Reagan, who you can find and follow at Twitter at Reagan World, and also former New York Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik. Both Bernie and Michael Skyping in tonight from Southern California. You have our thanks, gentlemen. We appreciate your insights and analysis. Steve Malzberg will stay with us, and we ask you to stay with us too as we continue our coverage both of the terror attacks in Brussels and the primaries and caucuses tonight. Part of America Votes 2016. Stay with us.